What is up, everybody? Mr. Purse here. Welcome to Unit 6.5C. We're doing a little reform and reaction on Japan, but you should know that already because this is the third video of 4 on reform and reaction and attempts to reform countries in order to industrialize 1750 to 1900. Let's rock and roll just straight up on this. This is a little contextualization on Japan. From 1450 to the mid-1800s, and really from the 1600s in Japan to the 1800s, the Tokugawa shogunate unified Japan. Japan had been decentralized as a feudal system, very loosely ruled, and under the Tokugawa family in the 1600s, they are unified. The shogun, if you don't remember, as a government leader, held all the power. There was an emperor who was around, but was primarily a figurehead. And because that Japan was unified now, there was less war to worry about. So they take this whole social class of people called the samurais, who've been fighting wars essentially for hundreds of years, and they are going to make them their educated bureaucrats. So we say, we don't need you to fight anymore because there's no more war because we unified everything. So we're going to take a lot of you and make you kind of educated elites. While this is all going on, the Europeans are trying to get into East Asia to try and trade, and the Japanese see kind of how the Europeans operate, and they decide to ban all European from their country, except for the Dutch, who were restricted in where they could trade, and they actually had to hang out on a little island off the coast of mainland Japan, and could only come with samurai escorts. So that's kind of where we were by the 1800s. What happens in the 1850s is the shogunate is not industrialized. Theme, common, all outside of the West. And the United States arrives in the mid-1800s, 1853 to be exact, with a fleet of ships. The United States government, the Navy, sends a fleet of ships led by this guy, Commodore Matthew Perry. This is his real picture. This is his Japanese drawing of him. And they basically arrive and say to the Japanese, open up your ports. You can either open up your ports and trade with us, or we're going to come back with more ships and we will destroy you. And Japan, although they're isolated, they have gotten word from other countries of what's going on around the world at this time, which is imperialism. And they realize that, like, they kind of saw what happened in China, and they know what's going on, and they're like, if we don't do something, we're going to get conquered. And we want to try and avoid that. So we need to do something to reform our country. So they essentially say, Westerners come in, like, we'll allow the U.S. to come in. We don't want to fight a war, but we are going to industrialize this country. And there is an overthrow of the Tokugawa shogunate to do this. This time period is going to be called the Meiji Era, and it goes from 1868, this is the reform part, until the 1900s. You could really consider this going all the way through the 1920s, and it really almost continues through World War II to a certain degree. Their goal is to modernize, westernize, industrialize. Again, that is just, they are all synonymous with each other. They all mean the same thing. What happens is the samurais and some of the nobles, the daimyos, overthrow the Tokugawa shogun. And they make the emperor more of a focal point. So basically, these educated elites, these educated bureaucrats who are samurais, they basically realize that they're totally behind it, and the shogunate doesn't want to do anything about it. And they're kind of like, bro, we got to do something. Like, we can't keep going these old ways. Like, we got to move into the future or we're going to be left behind. So the samurais lead almost like what we consider like a revolution or a civil war against the shogun and defeat them. So the samurais overthrow them, get rid of the shogun, bring the emperor's power back a little bit. Like, we make him a focal point more so than he was in the shogunate, but like, he's not really doing much still. But his name is Meiji. He's Emperor Meiji, and this is him right here. He's a younger guy. And what they're going to do in Japan is they're going to industrialize. They're going to focus on something a little different than what happened in the Ottoman Empire. This is going to be much more focused on state-sponsored industrialization. I mean, the government's taking tax dollars and trying to build factories. Rather than having investors or capitalists build this stuff, we're going to have the government do it all. So they're going to try and build factories and railroads, and they're going to update their education system where the government is going to pay for the top class of Japanese students to go to college or master's programs or doctorate programs in Europe or in the United States, and then come back to Japan. And when they come back to Japan, they can educate people on what they've learned. So we're going to try and have a lot more interaction with the West. Also, for their military, they're going to bring in Westerners to teach the Japanese how to use modern weaponry. All of the stuff that's going to be developed from the Industrial Revolution, new guns, new cannons, new military techniques. And we're going to bring in Westerners. We're going to pay them and hire them to come in and train our samurai soldiers to how to do this, and then hopefully they're trained well enough that we can, as Japan, we can go out and conquer other places. Just a couple pictures here. These are women dressed in very European looking clothes, but they're from Japan. You can see they have the painted white faces, which was common in Europe around this time period. Also very European dress, and they're playing a European instrument, the piano, showing this kind of combination. Also, this was a board game for kids in Japan at the time. Essentially, you're a student leaving Japan, and you have to travel around the world and gather ideas about Westernization and then come back to Japan. So that's the game. I don't know how fun it was. I have no idea. So the reaction to all this, they are the exception. Japan successfully industrializes, which is crazy that they are the ones of all these places that are going to try to industrialize. They are the one that is successful. They fully industrialize. It's like, boom, we did it. By 1900, they're like, oh, shoot, we don't have enough natural resources. We're a chain of islands. We don't have what we need to industrialize, because you need 3 things to industrialize. If you remember from Cause of Industrialization, you need money, which the government has. You need people, which they have. And you need natural resources, which they don't have. So they say, we need to go out and conquer some places. So they go out and they imperialize places in the late early 1900s, just like what we see in Europe. So they're going to go out and they're going to conquer places around them. They're going to conquer Korea, which is always getting conquered throughout history, parts of China, Manchuria, and then they go into Russia. And this cartoon here is a Russian political cartoon. This is the Russian guy kind of peeking over, and this is the Korean guy here, and this is the Japanese guy, and this guy with the Q would be from China. And the Korean guy is marching across, eventually getting into Russia. When they do this, they are going to be very successful. When they win these wars, it kind of elevates them to a higher status in the minds of the West. And they're going to be a big player in the first half, well, all of the 1900s, but especially in the first half of the 1900s for part of our story. So they successfully industrialized. That's what I got. You got any questions? You let me know. Right? Sure, why not? I'm out.